So let me tell you about how my day went today. I got up at 4:30 a.m. to catch a 7 a.m. flight to Chicago to come see this team after a frustrating loss from the night before, to come see this team play. Luckily, I didn't pay for the tickets though. Shout out to the Bulls for hooking me up with some of those. But I get up, I'm groggy, I'm tired, I kiss my daughters goodbye while they're still sleeping before I leave. I get on the plane and I'm getting excited because, hey, it's still a Bulls game. Going in person is always going to be fun, and maybe they'll actually make it a fun and competitive game against the Orlando Magic. Flight takes off, it's a 4-hour flight. I start working on a different video, which I'll now have to delay to tomorrow. It's about the Bulls and the discourse around the Bulls trading Patrick Williams. And then I land to all hell breaking loose on my Twitter timeline that there is now increased openness on both sides between the Bulls and Zach Lavine about exploring a trade. Now, this was coming from Shams Charania, so naturally it's going to get shared everywhere and everyone is going to be reacting to it and taking it seriously. Now, I don't know if I would call this a trade request. In fact, if you could argue, this is really not new news because Zach has been in trade rumors for some time now, and we already know the Bulls were exploring the trade market for Zach, as it was reported in the offseason that they were both taking calls and making calls to understand what his overall value is. The biggest difference here is that Zach himself is now open to exploring a trade, which is significant because up until this point, Zach has always been talking about how he wants to be in Chicago. Chicago is his home, and despite being in all the trade rumors, he's always maintained that he wants to be here. So anyway, I just got to my hotel room, so I had a whole Uber ride over to think about this, and man, a lot to unpack here, but I'm going to try and keep it brief and just give my initial thoughts so as not to just babble on and on about this. First of all, you guys know I've been critical of Zach Lavine for a while now. I mean, really ever since starting the channel. I started right at the beginning of the 2020-21 season when the new front office took over, and I've been critical of Zach because I have higher expectations of him than a lot of other guys on the roster because he's so talented and gifted as a basketball player, and you know that he has the ability to be an elite player on the court. And to be fair, throughout Zach's tenure with the Bulls, he's been incredible. He's gotten better year after year. He went through some of the toughest times and darkest days of the rebuild, the Fred Hoiberg era, the Jim Boylan era, and for most of it, he was the best player on this team. Always remained professional and would even play through injuries to help the team win. So while yes, part of me is going to be sad to see Zach if and when he does leave Chicago, because again, these are still just rumors for the moment, but at the same time, I think I've gotten to a point in not only where this current roster is at and the organization as a whole, but also where Zach Lavine is and his role, that yeah, it's time for a change. I mean, really, change needed to happen a long time ago. We all saw it, the media saw it, but for some reason it's taken the front office this long to come to this realization. This group, after Lonzo got injured, was never going to work. They tried to make it work. They tried to make continuity a thing. Yeah, the Nashville trip was a good idea to try to promote team bonding, but at the end of the day, when you see the results and how the core three guys have performed when playing together, how bad their overall net rating is, how they've been unable to string wins together consistently, you knew that it was time for a change. And for Zach Lavine's part, I think he knows the writing is on the wall. More recently, he hasn't looked engaged. His body language on the court says it all. The quotes he's made to the media have been questionable when talking about how we need to fix things from top to bottom. He just has not seemed like he's been fully invested in this. I know that's going to upset some Zach stans, but it's the truth. And this really is dated all the way back to last season when Zach got upset about being benched in the fourth quarter of that Magic game that he was terrible in. His decision-making on the court as a whole and kind of just doing his own thing at times and not getting the team involved when things aren't going his way. And to be fair, I mean, I think Zach, it's hard to be engaged and 100% committed to this team and the vision of this team when the vision isn't really there, and the fact that his name has constantly been in trade rumors. Like, as much as you can try and block that out, you can say, well, it's just the business side of basketball. It's eventually going to get to you mentally and to the point where it's going to impact your play on the court. And you can see that so far this season with Zach Lavine, really having one of the worst starts to a season since he first came to Chicago. He's not being able to finish at the rim, something Zach has always been so great at. Poor efficiency from three when he's been a great three-point shooter, getting outworked on defense, which he's never really been a good defender, but his defensive miscues this season have been especially bad. And with the Bulls sitting 4-7, and even some of those wins not really being all that convincing, yeah, you get to a point where you see the writing on the wall. The team is crashing and burning, and if you're Zach Lavine, yeah, you're probably looking for a change of scene. And honestly, I'm not opposed to the Bulls moving on from Zach at all. He's their most tradable asset at this time. And the longer you keep this crew together, the more you just keep delaying the inevitable and the further your leverage goes down in a trade. I mean, that's another reason why the Bulls really screwed this up, because rather than trying to get out ahead of this, knowing this was eventually going to happen, they waited until things got so bad to the point where now teams know that they're going to be going on a fire sale and will settle for less in making trades. The price of Zach's trade value has dropped dramatically from what it was over the offseason, not only because Zach has been struggling to start the year, but also because it's become apparent the Bulls are going to have no other choice than to blow this thing up and to make that known to the league, killing their leverage and the upper hand as a result of it. Now, what does a trade like Zach Lavine look like? I honestly have no idea. You'd have to hope they could at least get a first round pick, maybe some younger, not quite established players that they could build with. But the problem is, according to the report from Shams Charania, the Bulls are wanting to keep DeMar if they move Zach Lavine, which for the life of me, I cannot understand. That makes no sense at all. If you're trading Zach, you're tearing it all down. Like, how are you going to build around an old DeMar DeRozan and Nikola Vucevic with some younger players? How does that even move the needle for this team at all? How could you possibly still try to make a playoff push with this? I just really don't get it. Now, it's not surprising. It's not surprising knowing what we know of this front office. They're still going to cling to this idea of wanting to win now. And so it wouldn't shock me if the Bulls try and go a route of what the Sixers did with James Harden, getting some draft capital, but really bringing in a bunch of already established veteran players who can complement DeMar and Vooch. It makes absolutely no sense, but I can honestly see it happening. And it's just going to enrage Bulls fans even more. But look, I think at the end of the day, change is on the horizon. It's actually going to happen this time. Unlike we all thought it was going to happen at the trade deadline last year or in the offseason, you're finally going to see meaningful changes, especially if the Bulls continue to put up piss poor performances. Now, do I think a trade for Zach is going to be happening anytime soon? Probably not. It's likely going to take some time assessing the overall market, see who the highest bidder is, and keep in mind a lot of players that would potentially be included in a trade package aren't eligible to be traded until January. As an example of a trade package that, people have been throwing around with Zach going to the Lakers, guys like Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, D'Angelo Russell, none of these guys can be traded until January. So it's very possible you might not see a Lavine trade go down until closer to the deadline. But I think it's clear now. This is going to be the last season we see this group together. More specifically, Zach Lavine in a Bulls uniform. Which is sad because he's been part of this organization for such a long time, but it's also the right move and direction for the Bulls to take. Let me know what you guys thought on the breaking news surrounding Zach Lavine. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.